Move over, Harry. When it comes to celebrity pals, William has just landed one of the biggest stars on the planet tonight in a move sure to rub salt into the wounds of his bitter brother. Prince William has only gone and bagged Tom Cruise as a surprise celebrity guest for the London Air Ambulance charity gala he spoke at this evening. Meanwhile, the Duke of Sussex has jetted out of the UK after his ever-so-brief reunion with his father, King Charles. In his whistle-stop visit, Harry didn't even stay the night in any royal residence or catch up with his older brother. But this is no real surprise, as Harry's made no bones about the rift between him and old Willie. For starters, there's the very fact Harry called his memoir Spare, immortalising his title as the surplus son of a monarch who already had an heir. And in that book, he famously told of a fight with his big bro. He grabbed me by the collar, ripping my necklace, and he knocked me to the floor. I landed on the dog's bowl, which cracked under my back, the pieces cutting into me. But Willie really went for the jugular when he swung at Harry's wife just a year after their wedding. Meg's difficult, he said. Oh, really? She's rude. She's abrasive. She's alienated half the staff. talkTV's correspondent, Oliver Whitfield-Miocic, is outside that charity gala right now. Oliver, very good evening to you.
Good evening, Mike.
So, we had a star turn from Tom Cruise. We had Prince William talking about how grateful he was to the people who had sent all their good wishes to his father and to his wife, both of whom have been in the wars over medical issues. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so the Prince is actually still inside. We had expected him to have left within the past half hour, but he's having such a good time. He's stayed in there with his Hollywood star pal, Tom Cruise. Now, in that speech, he addressed the health concerns, not only of the King, but also of his wife, and said that he appreciated all of the kind words that he had received. And then, in a light-hearted moment, he had said, it's fair to say that the past few weeks have had a rather medical focus. So I thought I'd come to an air ambulance function to get away from it all. It's not just any old air ambulance function. The Prince has been the patron of the London Air Ambulance charity since 2020. Of course, he himself used to be an air ambulance pilot, and the charity here is hoping to raise £15 million for 2 new choppers for the capital. Now, this, of course, comes as the Prince is expected to take on more roles in the future with King Charles's cancer diagnosis, meaning that the monarch has got to step back from public duties while he undergoes treatment for that form of cancer that he has been diagnosed with. But it leaves a lot of pressure on Prince William, because not only does he have to step into the breach and take over some of those public duties, he's also got to take care of his wife, the Princess of Wales, because she is recuperating from that abdominal surgery, and he's also got to help take care of the children. It's been a busy day for the Prince as well. Earlier on, he had an investiture at Windsor Castle where he was handing out gongs, including to the top goal scorer for the Lionesses, Ellen White. And then it can't be unnoticed that he didn't see his brother, Prince Harry, who was only in the country for 26 hours, having made a transatlantic flight 5,000 miles from Los Angeles yesterday, arriving in to London's Heathrow Airport, then zooming over to Clarence House so that he could see his father, King Charles. There for half an hour, a very, very brief meeting, and it's understood that the King and Queen held up their helicopter journey to Sandringham so that they could meet with Prince Harry. And then Harry believed to have stayed the night in a London hotel, and then earlier this afternoon heading back to Heathrow Airport onto a flight and now out of our airspace. So a busy day it has been, and one final bit of royal news we've had today from the Prime Minister's office this time. The engagements, the phone calls that take place between the King and the Prime Minister will still be going ahead, and this time it will be a phone call instead of an in-person audience as the King focuses on his health.
Oliver, thanks very much indeed. Oliver Whitfield-Miocic there reporting into us from central London, where the event is still going on. One of the things that William supposedly said was about Tom Cruise. He said, I should also take this opportunity to give a mention to our fellow pilot, Tom Cruise, which I think in the wake of the old Legends of Aviation thing over in America last week will probably irk Harry even more. With me now in the studio is royal biographer Hugo Vickers. Hugo, welcome to the Independent Republic of Mike Graham. Interesting few days it's been, and what have you made of it all?
Well, it certainly has taken everybody by surprise
Mm.
because we had no indication that there was going to be the announcement about the king having cancer,
Right.
and that I think took everybody, put everybody into shock.
Yeah.
I think the
It was a
reaction.
shock, wasn't it?
It was a great shock, and
Yeah.
I think the sort of one interesting thing that came out of it was the great warmth and affection for the king.
Yes.
It hasn't always been like that, as you know, with him. But I
Right.
mean, I think people were genuinely sorry to hear this news
Yes.
because, in a way, he's just really getting into his stride as a head of state, and I think that. He's found it easier being a head of state to talk to people like President Macron,
Yeah.
President Biden, or whoever, because sort of he has these one-to-one talks.
Yes.
Whereas when he was Prince of Wales, they kind of didn't quite, you know, they thought of him
Mm.
as sort of interfering, and now they don't.
And it's obviously, for him, an incredibly tough act to follow, because one of the things, I suppose, for all of us is that we've been so used to just having the late Queen being in charge. I mean, certainly all of my life, and I'm presuming probably all of yours as well. And suddenly you've got a new guy in town who is not really new, but you've known him all your life, and suddenly he's supposed to take over, and I think he's done a pretty good job, actually.
Well, I think really from the start, that first address that he gave the night after the Queen died was incredibly reassuring.
Yes.
And he was looking out in a way he was comforting us at a time when we might have been comforting him.
Yes.
Because in the past, sometimes like when the Queen Mother died, for example, it was all sort of, what am I going to do now? I've lost my greatest ally.
Yeah.
This time it was tremendously focused on everybody else. It was a
Right.
brilliant address.
Yes.
And the warmth of the reception that he got when he walked into the, you know, outside Buckingham Palace, you could see it.
Right.
And in fact, so the transference of affection was very quick and very impressive, I think.
Yes, I think so. And of course, William speaking tonight for the first time really since the announcement about the cancer, showing himself also to be very ready to take the reins of power if it's necessary for him to do so. You wrote an interesting piece, I think, in the Mail back in December about how it's nonsense to suggest that Charles is going to be a caretaker king. And I think you're right to say that. Obviously, you know, we hope that he's going to be fine, and we hope that the cancer is been caught very early, and he may well have quite a long reign. But it must be a strange situation for them both at the moment.
Well, absolutely. I mean, one of the problems of historically for a Prince of Wales, any Prince of Wales in history, is that he never knows when he's going to be called upon to take the throne.
Yes.
He's a heartbeat away.
Right.
You know, and so that could happen at any point. And for the king, I think it's disappointing because, you know, it's obviously going to curb his activities. I mean, we don't know whether he'll be up to doing overseas tours or riding at the Trooping the Colour and all that sort of things that he does. But it's good news that he's able to continue behind the scenes. And if you think back to lockdown, I thought it was very reassuring when we used to see the Queen quite often.
Yes.
We didn't actually see her in person, but we knew she was all right.
Yes.
So we have to...
Well, she made that great speech, didn't she? We shall meet again. And that was brilliant.
I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean...
That's what she was fantastic at, though, wasn't it?
And if you remember, she threw in a sort of wonderful line, like when she'd spoken from Windsor Castle 80 years before, because in the war she had made that other speech.
Right, incredible stuff.
Yes.
I mean, tonight's events as well, I think, show Prince William is kind of, you know, just getting on with business. Harry has become, to some extent, a bit of a non-event, really, a bit sort of irrelevant. We'll maybe get onto him in a minute. But Tom Cruise showing up will probably show the rest of the world as well that the royal family is still very much at the sort of the heated centre of everything.
Well, I mean, you talk about the amount of money they're going to raise by his presence tonight. And that, of course, is where the royal family perform one of their many useful roles.
Yeah.
And the only thing which is rather tricky for them at the moment is that they've invented this term, the working royals, but of the working royals, not very many of them are working at the moment.
And we can see them there. I mean, it's a great look for William. I can't imagine Harry and Meghan being particularly happy with that. But you're absolutely right. You know, here we have a royal family that I think a lot of people weren't really aware was quite a busy family in terms of all the things that they do. It's only really now that because they've become so debilitated because of Harry, because of Andrew, because of now the fact that Catherine isn't able to do anything until after Easter, the fact that King Charles now isn't able to do anything. I mean, it's really put it into sort of stark sort of contrast.
Well, the person you should listen to on every possible available opportunity is Princess Anne. And she was asked quite recently about the slimmed-down monarchy. And she said, it doesn't look very good from where I'm standing.
Right.
And she can say that sort of thing.
She can say that sort of thing. In fact, funnily enough, a friend of mine got an MBE, and when he came down, it was when the Queen was still alive, but he wasn't sure if she was well enough to do it. And it was Princess Anne that presented it to him in Windsor. And he was absolutely thrilled, and he said she was brilliant, knew everything about him. even though he was about number 250 traipsing into the room, you know, because they have this incredible ability. But let's talk a little bit about the Harry visitation, because we heard from our reporter there, Oliver, that he had about half an hour meeting with the King and Camilla. I mean, are we sure that Camilla was there?
We aren't sure about anything, but we know that he went to see his father. And actually, I think full credit to him. He did come over, albeit very briefly, to support his father at the coronation. He showed his face. That was good. He didn't stay very long.
Right. And they didn't really speak at that, I understand.
Well, I'm not so sure. But we didn't, obviously they didn't have much chance to speak because he was being crowned.
Well, he wasn't around for long, was he?
No, he wasn't around for long, but he did go back to Buckingham Palace after the coronation, so he may well have had a short chat with him. But at any rate, this time he made the effort to come over. And, you know, when you get the news that your father is ill, you know, full marks to him for coming over and seeing him. And if, as we hope, the conversation was, you know, I've come to see you, I hope you're going to be all right, that would have been an enormous tonic for the King, I think.
Yes, if that's indeed what happened.
If
but it
that's
does
what
seem
happened.
unusual, I think, because I think a lot of us thought, well, if he's made the effort to come, then maybe he'll spend some time. It won't just be a flying visit. But instead of which, I mean, the way it looks is that they made some time for him, but they literally kind of kept the helicopter blades going on the grass at Buckingham Palace as they were having a meeting. Didn't invite him back to Sandringham, didn't invite him to stay at one of the royal residences, and instead he ended up in a hotel. I mean, it doesn't sound as though...
Well, we don't know if they didn't invite him, but he may have already made his own arrangements, to be honest. But I still think it was a good thing that he came. And he has engagements in Canada, I think, with the Invictus Games.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
So that was why, if he didn't come now, he wouldn't have been able to come for perhaps 10 days or so.
Right.
So I think it's good that he came.
Right.
And
so are you one of those that thinks this is a good sign, then?
Well, listen, there's a lot of talk about whether there's a possibility of reconciliations. There's always a possibility of reconciliation if both sides are prepared to engage in it. So this surely is a step. I'm not saying it's more than that.
Right, because the William angle, of course, would suggest that it isn't really a step because William didn't find time to see him, when he probably could have done if he wanted to.
He probably could have done, but that perhaps wasn't part of the agenda. I mean, I think that the relationship between William and Harry is, of course, bad.
Yes.
Whereas the King has been brilliant because he's kept the door wide open for Prince Harry.
He has.
He's never responded to any of the jives that have come from California.
Yeah.
And so the door was wide open and Prince Harry came through the door.
Yes.
That's all we can say, really.
Possibly so. I mean, but Harry's also said that, you know, he's not really masked his dislike for Camilla, the Queen. He's also said at one time, I think during the Oprah Winfrey interview, that his father doesn't take his calls. You know, he's complained about his brother bullying him.
His father took his call this time.
Well, he did, yeah. I mean, how much work do you think had to go through for that to work out? Would there have been intermediaries? Would there have been people that he would have approached first?
No, I think, as I said before, the fact that the door was wide open was that it was just required him to pick up the telephone. Clearly, the King had called him, we know that, to tell him personally about his illness. You read out some interesting choice statements from the book Spare.
Yes.
We must remember that that book was ghost-written by a very clever man called J.R. Moringa.
Yes.
And J.R. Moringa himself had a very bad relationship with his father. And he described in his book, The Tender Bar, a time when he was knocked over in a bar. And as he fell, he thought about his childhood. He remembered this. I don't know, Mike, if you've been knocked... I luckily haven't been knocked over in a bar, but I don't know if one has much time to have
I
those
haven't
thoughts.
actually, no, funnily enough.
Well, we're lucky. But, you know,
yeah.
you're more worried... I personally think I would be more worried about whether I was going to hit my head or whatever
Yes.
than have all these thoughts. So I think you can take a lot of what was written in Spare with a pinch of salt.
Well, maybe that's what Harry should have done and thought
Yes.
about taking some of it out.
He
But
should.
Hugo, very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. I'm sure we'll be talking again because I think the story has many, many more chapters to run.